Hello, election judges. I'm Mike Stolberger, Blue Earth County Director of Elections. I'm going to take you on to the next video in your equipment orientation series, and this one is on the PollPad. The PollPad is our electronic roster, and it is a tool that our election judges really enjoy using on election day because it really helps speed up the voting process, and I think that's something that's going to be really valuable for the 2020 elections as we try to help voters move through the process as quickly as possible in response to COVID-19. So let me jump into the training now, and we'll get you familiar with the PollPads. Just like our other sessions, we're going to introduce you to the equipment. I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about the hotspot, which is unique to the PollPad, before we talk about setting up the equipment overall and then tearing it down at the end of the night. And then, of course, we'll spend some time on some common troubleshooting questions that you'll likely have on election day. So the PollPad, as I mentioned, is the electronic roster. Election judges will use this device to check in and verify the eligibility of voters. It's also used to register new voters who are registering on election day. For 2020, all of our polling places will be using these devices, whereas in 2018 we were using them only in Mankato, Lake Crystal, and Eagle Lake. So we're really excited to expand their use for the 2020 elections. These are manufactured by a company called No Inc. out of St. Louis, Missouri. These devices are specific to the precinct, and they'll be labeled very clearly in terms of what precinct should be using them. We want to make sure you pay very close attention to that on election morning to make sure you're setting up the right devices. Another friendly reminder is that we want to make sure that these are plugged in throughout the election day and only unplugged if you need to make the device mobile for some reason. But otherwise, when it's sitting on a table, let's keep it plugged in using the surge protectors and cords that we provide. There are also some new features built into the PollPad for 2020, and we'll explain that as we go through the operations and how to use the devices. One thing that I want to remind everybody or introduce you to is that the PollPad does walk you through the steps, step by step, prompting you along the way, which makes it really valuable in terms of registering voters and checking them in appropriately so that you're following state law. So as I mentioned, I want to talk about the hotspots. There are two types of hotspots that will be deployed. One of the hotspots is a smaller unit, and this is called a jetpack or a MiFi. And this is going to be used in our smaller precincts, whereas the Inseego, which is the larger one and has antennas on it, will be used in our larger polling places. Always, always, always follow the instructions to set up these devices. They'll be provided right with the devices, and they're very easy to set up as long as you follow the instructions. We want to make sure that we plug them in to power, and then we want to either attach the antennas or power it up depending on which device you have. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check the indicator lights on the screen to make sure that we have a connection and that we're receiving and sending data. Pretty simple devices to set up. We just want to make sure we do that first and very early in the morning, and we want to always make sure that we plug it in and attach the antennas before we turn it on. Alright, so for the PollPad itself, the PollPad looks like it has a lot of moving parts, and it does. However, all of those parts are going to go together very quickly, especially for our returning experienced judges or for anyone who just has some experience with technology. Follow the instructions that are provided in the case. You're going to plug it into power. That's something that we want to make sure that folks don't forget, and we want to make sure these devices are ready to roll at 7 in the morning. We make it very easy to do the connections because everything has colored dots on it to help you line up what goes where. So just make sure you follow those steps. Make sure you plug it into power, and then also make sure that your printer that is associated with it gets plugged into power as well. Check all of your connections, look at the screen, and make sure that it's ready to roll at 7 o'clock in the morning on election day. Alright, when we come to tearing down the equipment at the end of the election day, we again want to follow the instructions. It walks you through the process for packing up the PollPads and getting it all put away in its case. We want to make sure that we leave at least one PollPad fully operational until that last voter has worked through the voting process. If it's a slow primary election night, you might start packing up some of these earlier, but always keep one fully functional. Again, the actual process for tearing down is to follow the instructions in the case. You can begin packing up the printers and other items before you actually power down the PollPad. And the reason we want to do that is we want to give about 5 minutes for that PollPad to transfer data back to our central systems after you've checked in or registered a voter on it. Don't just help a voter then immediately power it down. We want to give that a little bit of time to make sure that data transfer occurs. Make sure you put the PollPads and printers in the right case. And then your very, very last step on election night regarding the PollPad is to power down and pack up that hotspot that you've been provided. So some common questions for you, some things to think about as we work through the PollPads and any issues you might have on election day. First and foremost, we have folks say that the printer won't print. That's most likely because it's not powered on and plugged in. We want to make sure that those two pieces are in place. You'll have an indicator light on the front of the machine that will tell you that it is powered on and plugged in. We also want to make sure we have the right printer associated with the right PollPad. They're numbered, so you'll be checking that as part of your instructions to set up the equipment. And then we can also make sure that the paper is loaded correctly. We'll explain what that means in the operational part of the training as well. How do we keep the PollPad sanitized? We're going to keep them sanitized much like we do our other electronic equipment by using only the provided alcohol wipes on the screen. And we're only going to clean that when necessary. So if the same election judge is using the screen, we don't need to wipe it down each time. It's only when we have somebody else touching the screen that we're going to need to clean that. And also, how do we know if the PollPad is charging? That's a very good question. Remember, we want to keep the PollPads plugged in throughout election day. We're going to know that the PollPad is charging by looking at the device's screen. Up in the corner, there will be an indicator that says that it is plugged in and charging, just like any other normal iPad or tablet device that you'd be looking at. And then we very frequently get questions about the hotspot and that it's not working. Our most common reason for the hotspot to not be working is that it didn't get plugged in. So we want to make sure it's plugged in and into a working power plug. If that is in place and everything looks right in that regard, then we're going to try moving the hotspot to a different location in the building to see if it can get better signal and reception. If these are all failing, we're going to call the county office and help resolve that, or we're going to rely on the county election staff that'll be operating in our Mankato polling places on election day. Alrighty, so with that I come to the end slide again with some contact information. As I said, the PollPad is a really intuitive and fun device for folks to use on election day, and so I think you're really going to enjoy having that as a resource to help you and your voters in terms of registering folks and checking them in. If you are not comfortable with iPad technology or tablet technology, or you're new to the PollPad, I would encourage you to attend the optional capstone session or give us a call and schedule some time to come in and use the device. Once you've worked through a few scenarios on it, you'll feel very comfortable with it, I do believe. And as I've said, many of our judges enjoy using those devices and look forward to having them when they work future elections. So again, thank you. You've got one more video that is on the Omni ballot. We'll orientate you to the Omni ballot, and then we'll move on to some operational videos to show you exactly how you use all of these pieces of equipment on election day. Thank you.